So hello friends, today I am going to brief you about the new AWS service that is known as AWS Batch. AWS Batch is quite new because it was launched in 2017, and the aim of this video is to enable you to use this service for all of your use cases that fits into this service. The service lets you run your application tasks without worrying about the EC2 instances. It lets you run many jobs, that is ranging from 0 to thousands of jobs, and you can offload the computing tasks of your application by using this AWS Batch service. So let's begin. Prerequisites. So there are basically no prerequisites, and I will try to brief you about all the terms that come along in the video. So what is AWS Batch? AWS Batch Service allows you to submit your application workload on AWS in the form of a job. And what is a job? Job is just a set of programming code. That's all. For example, a job could be a hello world program, a program that reads data from a database, or a 5,000 line of programming code that performs many complex tasks. It means that all of these codes or a set of code could be submitted in the form of a job to AWS Batch Service, and AWS Batch Service takes care of rest. It just runs your programming code in the form of jobs. Before jumping into the practical, let's go through some of the terms that we are going to encounter in a moment. So EC2. I think most of you must be aware that EC2 is just a server that is provided by the AWS EC2 service, and this service is basically used to get the server, and server is the underlying machine on which each and every code is basically runs. Second is the Docker image. The image to wrap up your code or application as an image so that it can be run in any environment. So Docker images are in itself is a concept, but let me brief you about this because we are going to use the Docker image in this service. For example, you have a set of code or a program that you want to submit as a job, but you first need to package it as an image so that it can be utilized by the AWS Batch. Docker container. So Docker container is just used to run these Docker images. For example, you have packaged some programming code as an image. Now you need a container just to run that image. AWS Batch basically runs Docker image through container as an independent job. So let's go to AWS and try to see how we can configure this service. Okay, so as you can see, this is the AWS management console, and I will go to this service Batch. This service is under the compute section. So let's click on Batch, and okay, so AWS Batch enables you to easily and efficiently run batch computing workloads of any scale on AWS using Amazon EC2 instances and Amazon EC2 Spot. So friends, actually there are two types of EC2 instances, simple EC2 and EC2 Spot. So the major difference is just that EC2 Spots are very cheap. So let's get started. So when we get started, we just see that it asks define a job. So defining a job gives us some options, that is using Amazon EC2, all batch will run your job using Amazon EC2, and second is no job submission, just create the compute environment, and or just skip the wizard and see other options. So friends, I am just going to skip the wizard to just give you an idea what all is in this AWS Batch console for configuration purpose. So on the left we can see dashboard. So it's empty because I haven't configured anything. I just wanted to brief you about these options and then we will go to configure them one by one. So dashboard will give you a complete picture of this configuration. Jobs are containerized workloads that you submit to AWS Batch. So friends, as I said that you will submit your jobs in the form of container. As a Docker images it will run. So a job has different lifecycle stages. You can see submitted, pending, runnable, starting. These names are pretty much self-explanatory, and you can see that when a job is configured we would be able to see these number of stages of a job lifecycle. Job definitions. So job definition is just simply a template that will enable you to submit huge amount of jobs just by using these job definitions. So don't worry, we will configure them and we will go into detail, but just know that it's just a template to allow you to configure your jobs. Job queues. So job queue is something that the moment you create a job it lands in a job queue, and from the queue only the next stage, that is compute environment, it will pick up your jobs. So the next stage is compute environment. So compute environment is a very important configuration. Basically you are telling the AWS that this is the kind of environment or what kind of environment you want to set up to run your batch jobs. This will ask you about the number of virtual CPUs that you want to set up, the minimum number of CPUs and the maximum number of CPUs that you want to configure. So friends, we will see all these details soon. So let's go again to the batch so that we can start configuring it directly from the scratch. So on this console we can see that we have this option of using Amazon EC2. So we are going to use the Amazon EC2 instances only underneath to run our batch jobs. Next is job definition. So create a new job definition. For the first time we are creating, so leave it as is. Job definition name, you can edit the name, but I am leaving it as is. Job role. Job role is that for example you have created the job and your running job wants to use some other AWS services. For that purpose a role is required by the job if it is using some other AWS services. If not, then not. So I am leaving it as it is. Container properties, that is job type. So there is a single job that I am going to create for now, so I am selecting it as single. Container image. So container image is basically a Docker image that I suggested earlier, that if we want to submit our code in the form of job to the batch, then it must be wrapped up inside an image. So this image we don't have as of now. So let's first create this image. So let me go to my IntelliJ. So where I have just created a very simple basic program which is just printing this is good, and it is printing it for 50 times. So you can see that I am using Java for this program, and you can do this with any other programming language. So if you want to do this with Java, then I am using IntelliJ. You can do it with any other IDE of your choice and create just a simple program inside the main just to test this. Now I'm going to wrap up this code inside in Docker image, and then that Docker image By using that Docker image, we would be able to submit our job. So how to create the Docker image? Now the next question is, so for that you have to download the Docker from the internet and install it on your system. So I have already downloaded it and installed it. So it's an exercise for you to just search on the internet regarding Docker, read something about it, and download it and install it. Once you install it, the next step is that inside your project directory, just create a Docker file. So this is a Docker file where I have written some set of commands just to create the Docker image. For example, from that I would be using Java 8 version, working directory, then copying the Java class files to the app directory, compiling it, and then just running it. So these commands are just to create the Docker image. Once this Docker image is created, then this Docker image needs to be pushed to the AWS repository only, because AWS Batch runs the job as a Docker image, and it will take the Docker images directly from the Docker repository. So let's see where the Docker images should be pushed from our local machine, where the image is going to reside inside AWS. So Docker container image, over here we need to give path of the image, that is where our image is stored, but where the images really get stored. So image is stored inside the Elastic Container Repository, so which is also a service. And let's go here. It is inside compute, that is ECR. Let's click on this. So Amazon Elastic Container Registry. So inside this Amazon Elastic Container Registry, we need to create a repository first. This repository will hold our image that we will push from my local system. So repository name, I can give any name, BATCH, batch test. Yeah, so batch test is fine. I will create a repository by this name. Okay, so repository is created. Now it's clearly says successfully created repository, view push commands. So if you select this, we can see push commands to run on my local system, be it Windows machine or Mac machine, and when I run them, then it will create the image on my local system and it will push it to the AWS. So let's start running them. So there are four commands, 1 2 3 4. Okay, so let's copy first command. Let me go to my terminal and let me just paste it. So it's just trying to log in into the AWS console by command line interface. So friends, mind this, that when you will be doing this, then when you will fire this command, then it will give login error, because this command is trying to establish a connection from your local machine to your AWS console via command line interface, and that is possible only with the help of some credentials, and those credentials are known as secret key and access key. So you will have to create these a user, you have to create a new user into the AWS IAM and download the access key and secret key, and by using those keys you can log in first into the AWS command line interface. By using the AWS command line interface, you can log in into the console, then only this command will work, otherwise you will get login error. So I'm not going into that detail. It's your job to just Google it and just create a user in IAM, get the credentials and log in from your console. If it is a Mac, then you can log in using terminal. If it is Windows, then you can log in using DOS shell. So I will just keep on firing these commands one by one just to create the image. So docker build t batch test. So you can find the details of these commands when you learn or search more about the Docker. So this is not in scope that we go into detail of Docker. So I am just firing up these commands just to push my image, just to create and push my image into the AWS repository. So this is the fourth and last command that will push the Docker image to the repository, and it might take some time, so let me pause the video and start it again. So it has pushed the image. Let's see where the image is. So we can see that inside the repository we have got the image. So this is the image. So let's copy the image URI. It's like a path to this image, and let's go to the configuration. Okay, so container image, I will paste this URI that I have copied. So command, it's basically a command, that is when the container starts running, what command we want to use to initiate it or pass some parameters. So for now I don't need any command. Virtual CPUs, that is the number of CPUs need you to run you need to run your job. So I will mark it as 1, but it is not actually virtual CPUs, so there is a bit catch here. So it's a bit confusing from AWS side, is why it's clearly stating it as virtual CPU, but in actual it is not. I will show you why. So for now we'll keep the memory as 500. I think that's enough. Job attempts 1. Execution timeout, I am not adding any timeout. You can define key value pairs. Environment variables, I am not adding. Next. So next is configure compute environment and job queue. So our compute environment is managed. Actually there are two types of compute environment. One is managed and one is unmanaged. Managed is that AWS manages the compute environment. It will scale up, it will add the EC2 instances as the number of job increases, and it will reduce the EC2 instances when the number of job decreases. Whereas if it is unmanaged, then you have to manage the EC2 instances. So we are using managed one. Compute environment name, you can edit it. Service role, so this is basically actually a service role that will be created to use this service, and this service name is this service role will be created by the name of AWS Batch Service role. So we will leave it as is EC2 instance role. So when you create when the AWS Batch will create the EC2 instances to run your job, those EC2 instances may require some roles to do some tasks, but in case they are using other AWS services. So if they are using other services, you can create a role and select it from here. If not, then leave it as is. So configure the compute resources, that is the EC2 provisioning model, on demand, spot. So there are two types of EC2 instances. One is on demand and spot. So on demand is that is available on the fixed price, that is price per hour, and spot instances are available by the bidding price. So I will be using on demand for this video. Allowed instance type, so you can select the instance type that you want to create to run these jobs. So I will set the default only, that is optimal. Next is minimum CPU. So this is a bit critical, because minimum CPU is if you want to to give it as, for example, 1 I need it for my job, then it will just maintain the minimum number of EC2 instances in your compute environment, so that minimum CPUs are available all the time. Desired CPU, like how much you think that will be optimal for your use case. I think just for demo I will keep it 1. And maximum number of virtual CPUs, that means the how much EC2 instances maximum will be created to provide you this much virtual CPU power. So I will keep it to, I think 4 is enough for my use case. So after this, networking, so VPC, leave it as default, subnets default, security groups default. You can tag your instances, job queue name, you can edit it. I'm leaving it as is. Let's create it. So as you can see that our environment is ready, and on this dashboard we can see now some configuration which was earlier not available. So I have run few jobs, and I ran them previously, but I don't know why they are still showing up even if I created a new environment from scratch. But okay, no worries. Let's go to the succeeded one, because the moment you create the environment, the job definition you give, according to that job definition it will trigger one job. So let's try to see all these things again. So this is the dashboard that is showing the status of the job queues, the amount of jobs submitted, pending, runnable, failed or succeeded. And here is the job definitions, jobs, the status of the jobs that are succeeded. If I click on running, they will disappear. Starting, no. Submitted, no. Failed, there is one failed job, and there is 4 successful job runs. So if I go to job definitions, there is one job definition available, and this is what we configured. And I can create a new revision by clicking this, or I can just submit a new job by creating this earlier job definition. So job queue, there is one job queue, and there is a priority also, because as I said that the job can be run basis on the priority also, and one job could also be dependent upon another job. So there is a compute environment also which shows all the configuration. So let's go on the dashboard and try to create a new job. So I am let me name it test job definition. Okay, by default one definition, job queue, one job, single job depends upon. Okay, so here is the configuration where I can provide some job ID that that job should run earlier or should be submitted first, and then only this job should run. Then there are job attempts, and then container properties, that is I don't have to give any container property over here, and just one virtual CPU it will take, memory 500 MB, and just submit. Okay, so friends, just one thing more is that this virtual CPU, there is a bit catch in this, that this virtual CPU is not the actual CPU count that is in the EC2 instances. It is basically the CPU shares. So the one virtual CPU is actually equivalent to 1024 CPU shares, and this is given in the docs. We can see the details inside the AWS docs regarding the AWS batch configurations, and inside the batch it is inside the docs it is visible that virtual CPU is the number of virtual CPUs to reserve for the container. This parameter maps to CPU shares in the create a container section and the CPU shares option to Docker run. Each virtual CPU is equivalent to 1024 CPU shares. You must specify at least one virtual CPU. So it is basically the way you are sharing the CPU, and this CPU is shared by the different containers that are running on the EC2 machine. So let's go back and keep it one only, memory 500, and submit the job. So I have submitted the job, and let's go here and try to see. Submitted, it is not showing. It's not showing up. Why? Oh, okay, so one is running. So submitted, it passed, pending, runnable, it all passed, and it is running. So we can see that it is running, and let's wait for a few seconds until it completes its run. So okay, so meanwhile friends, let me tell you that learning a new AWS service is not a tough job. You can just start it with minimum and you will learn it. But the real problem is discussing the use cases. There are, I think, more than 1300 services, and to find the best use case, to find the service that best suits your use case is actually a challenging thing. So we can discuss upon as what are the use cases for which the AWS batch should be used. So let me first see if it is completed. Okay, so this is succeeded. So the job that in last was, I think, this test job I created, and you can also see over here the details of this run, and then we can go to view logs, which shows. Okay, so here you can see the sysout statement is available. So good start, bad start, and after that there are 50 you can see this sysout statement that I put is visible. So this job runs successfully. So this is just all about how you are going to submit a job, and you can run it, you can see its status. And now I will brief you about the use cases and Java SDK. So friends, let's discuss about some use cases. So when will you use this service? Basically when you want to offload some of the compute tasks to AWS, when you don't know how much time will be taken by your job to complete. And another use case could be that it could also be an alternate to the AWS Lambda when execution time is not fixed. So there could be other use cases also depending upon the kind of task that is performed in your application. But I think with this video you will be able to clearly decide as for what use cases you can use this batch service. The Java SDK is available over here, where you can just download. It is for Java, and you can perform all these tasks that I have performed by using AWS console. You can perform these tasks directly from the by using the Java code. So this was all about the AWS batch. And friends, if you have any comments and any questions, then you can directly share them in the comment section. So thank you and bye.